We are getting new video of the National Guard arriving in Washington, D.C. after President Trump called them in to help bring order to our nation's capital. Reaction is pouring in from the left surrounding President Trump's major crime crackdown. And they're seething, all because President Trump wants to keep Americans safe. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Campagno, here with my co-host, Harris Faulkner. And also joining us today, Lisa Booth, Fox News political analyst, Kennedy, podcast host of Kennedy Saves the World, and Bill Hemmer, co-anchor of America's Newsroom. Now, President Trump says the National Guard and temporary federal control of the D.C. police will help him to clean up D.C. streets once and for all. But for some reason, Democrats aren't happy.
What the president did this morning was political theater. His idea in federalizing the police force of D.C. ignores the reality. They are making dramatic progress in reducing violent crime in D.C.
Focus those cameras on everything that's going on, because this president is trying to lead us into what could be called a civil war.
I call it an abuse of power, right? The only reason this can happen to us in Washington, D.C. is because we are not a state. In no other city can the president take over the local police force. And I think that is ridiculous and insane.
And more reactions pouring in on social media, with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries telling the president to, quote, get lost. Wow. And failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton calling him unhinged. Meanwhile, anti-Trump protesters hit the streets, pushing back against the crime crackdown by singing.
D.C. is our home. You can't have it wrong. D.C. is our home. You can't have it wrong.
The liberal media is joining the chorus as well.
Maybe it's not about crime. Maybe it's that he really enjoys using U.S. military force against American civilians on American soil and wants any excuse to do it anywhere he can.
Chris, to be honest with you, I'm trying to hold my temper. I think there's an ongoing argument that he's having in his head with Black Lives Matter. We have to understand this, Chris, within the context of Donald Trump's racial politics. He's actually trying to give his base red meat to get them off of the Epstein story, and it's on the backs of citizens in Washington, D.C.
And the Washington Post is getting called out for quoting one D.C. resident who claimed the city was safe, but also requested to speak anonymously off the record over, quote, concerns of personal safety. Bill, you can't make this stuff up, but at the end of the day, it's tragic because these are people's lives that are getting lost.
Good afternoon to you. Good to be with you all, ladies. It's been a minute. You're an attorney. I think one of the interesting things about what Trump has done here is that he goes in and picks our former colleague, Judge Jeanine Pirro. And in the District of Washington, D.C., you have federal and some local jurisdiction, which is significant because you can plug people into the job and they can enact what you want to happen. You can't do that in every city. You can't do that in every state, but in the District of Columbia, you can do that. How about this? What if it works? We're going to know, right? We're going to have an idea because it's going to go on for a minimum of 30 days, and we're going to have a fairly good example of how this is being implemented. There was a statistic we did on America's Newsroom earlier today on carjackings in Washington, D.C. The numbers are astonishing here. 56% of the carjackings are committed by people who are age 18 or younger.
Wow.
All right, where are you going to stop that, right? And how are you going to do it? And what sort of parental control will you try and exert? But I would just say, keep your powder dry and let's see if it works. And if it does, there will be an example for a lot of other cities, perhaps. And I know the left doesn't like that, but we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and not only are most of them committed by those minors, but they've also spiked in prevalence, up 600% almost in just 5 years alone. So let's talk about, how we got here, Kennedy. So we had Biden's former chief of staff. He was on Fox and Friends this morning with this explanation for what might be driving the youth behind this crime problem. Let's take a watch.
D.C. for 2022 to 2023 had about 40% of kids that faced chronic absentee. So that means they missed 10% or more of the school year. Well, where are those kids when they're not in school? They're outside causing a little bit of chaos. They're raiding grocery stores, drug stores. They're putting entire sections of the city under curfew. And the fact of the matter is the president is addressing something that is very real. We can live in this city and say it's a beautiful city, and we can also say that we have a chronic issue when it comes to our youth.
Right. Both are indeed true. And we've had on this network many times the mother of the slain congressional intern who is mourning her son and acknowledging that this is our nation's capital, and also it is not safe.
No, it's not safe, but they point to the homicide rate, and that is not the only lens by which people look at crime, or by which people, more importantly, experience crime. And, you know, the perception anytime you have one of these carjackings or violent assaults, the perception is that this is an unsafe place. And, you know, D.C. should be a magnet for international visitors to come and get a taste of the very best of our country. But instead, people show up in D.C. and they worry they're going to be mugged. They're worried they're going to be shot. You know, there still is a lot of gun violence. I'm delighted that the homicide rate has come down in D.C. and other major cities. But we still have this massive issue. And Tyrus pointed something out on the 5 last week, which I thought was an interesting way of looking at this. So if you've got kids, and this is why Judge Jeanine Pirro is really frustrated in her new role, you can't charge, you know, if you've got kids committing felony carjacking at 14, 15, 16 years old, you can't charge them as adults, although they're committing adult crimes, especially, you know, 10 of them beating up big balls, that poor bastard. But you know, if you can't do that, then you've got older people, maybe in gangs, who know that these kids are not going to be incarcerated. So why not use them to commit the crimes that would have you sent away for a decade? And so that's what they're doing. They're taking advantage of the system. They're also taking advantage of kids who don't have a lot of oversight, who are being failed by their parents, as well as the horrible D.C. schools who spend more per pupil than any other school district in the country.
Right. And we spoke about this before, Harris, that the recidivism rate for these youth exceeds that of these adult repeat offenders. So it's grooming and creating. It's not just youth gone wild. I mean, it's a horrifically violent statistic that is real life. Congressman Henry Cuellar, we have a headline that we can pop up in just October of 2023, got carjacked at gunpoint. And to Kennedy's point, unless one of these youth actually kills someone with their gun, it still is not federal, and they still do not see jail time.
Well, and even the U.S. Attorney for D.C., Jeanine Pirro, said yesterday, I mean, she can get a conviction on that, and then you march in, and the judge is like, well, wait a minute, when it comes to sentencing and other things, and she kind of made a joke, but I don't know if she was kidding. They get off and go to college. Like, those were her words. Look, this has just been posted by the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, because about 12 minutes or so ago, she wrapped up her meeting with D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and also the acting Metro Police Chief Pam Smith. We took a little bit of their comments live. She said, this is Bondi, I just conducted a productive meeting with the mayor at the Department of Justice. We agree that there is nothing more important than keeping residents and tourists in D.C. safe from deadly crime. At present, President Trump's direction, the Justice Department will work closely with D.C. city government to make Washington, D.C. safe again. And then moments later, when we took this live on the Faulkner Focus, you heard Mayor Bowser saying, we are going to cooperate. I mean, they're cooperating.
Yeah.
And I said at the time, a few minutes ago, we haven't heard, at least I haven't heard other leaders of blue cities say that. They haven't said we're going to cooperate with the President of the United States and him and what he's putting in place. But her police department has taken over. It's under federal control, but still willing to work with the president. I wonder if that sets a tone as we go across the country. When this works out, as Bill's pointing out, we'll be watching it.
And I think it underscores an acknowledgement that what the president is doing is well within the bounds of his executive authority, Lisa, and it's certainly on behalf of the American people and those D.C. residents. So what I don't understand is all of these protesters and these liberal crying voices on these media shows that are downplaying people's experiences. No, that's not what the statistics show. Well, what showed me is when I got carjacked. What showed me is when I got jumped and assaulted, etc. So just blocks from those protesters that were singing, a man was shot and killed. We have that headline, too, that we can pop up on the screen. So how are they living such dual reality lives when the real reality is no one is safe in D.C. until now?
Well, the way I look at this is I could weigh 800 pounds at one point, and then you get down to 600. Are you still not killing yourself? Are you still not dying right? Are you still not going to kill yourself? So just because homicide rates have gone down doesn't mean that the homicide rates in D.C. aren't higher. than most major cities in America. And you look at 2024 alone, they're fourth highest in the nation, right? So those two things aren't mutually exclusive. And to your point, Emily, you had an ABC anchor yesterday talking about how where the ABC bureau is in Washington, D.C., that there were 2 shootings nearby in the last 6 months, that she's been jumped, that her colleague's car had been carjacked that morning, right? And you also have the D.C. police union chief saying, look, we need this, praising what President Trump is doing. And to your earlier point, he's absolutely within the law of what he's trying to do. First of all, D.C. is so different than any other country in America because the Constitution grants Congress the ultimate authority over Washington, D.C. Also, federal statutes give him the authority over the D.C. National Guard. And then the Home Rule Act gives him the authority to take over the D.C. police in cases of emergency. So he's completely within his rights. And, you know, this reminds us of the cheap flakes, right, where the media are telling us to not believe things that are directly in front of us and the things that are so obvious. So I think that citizens of D.C. understand this. Most of America understands this. The left, you know, they don't want us to believe.
Quick point. I know it was 24 hours ago, but you mentioned the mayor. I would have brought Muriel Bowser into that press conference yesterday in the briefing room. I don't know if she was invited or not, but it would have been good to have her stand up with the cabinet members up there and answer the questions for the media. And because I think there is a measure of cooperation. Right. I think she does want to get this thing right. I thought that would have been a smart move.
My one thought about that, though, is do you set yourself up and maybe set herself up again? I mean, you kind of
I think a lot of the reporters would have fired their questions at her. And
yeah. And what needed to happen about the time she spoke, and just a few minutes ago, the National Guard had just gotten on the ground. We had that as brand new video. So now she's like, okay, now I can comment. But I like the idea. I just think it might have been too early.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, so maybe next time. Hey, everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.